When we go to the doctor and we get a diagnosis, along with it comes a prognosis. And that prognosis is something that is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, except for that it's a nocebo effect of the words spoken by the practitioner. And most people don't question it. They simply accept the prognosis, which I would describe as falling prey to the prognosis. We don't exercise our choice because we don't know how to make a choice. We've been programmed that we don't have any authority over what happens next in our life, that there are certain things that are just fate, destiny, and that we must succumb or otherwise fall prey to the prognosis. So I'm going to read from chapter 1 of Reality Transurfing. You can see that this falling prey to the prognosis can happen in any area of our life where we feel like we've been dealt a hand that we don't deserve, and that we're the only one, and that others are dealt better hands, etc. And of course, it flies in the face of our reality to say that that doesn't exist, right? Because we see it. Everybody's dealt different hands. But the problem is that we don't realize that we get to choose the cards that we play. So I'm just going to read here, and then I'll expand in a minute. Then I must have made some clumsy remark about how it must feel pretty damn good to be one of the lucky ones who could afford to live in such a beautiful place, to which, openly displaying his irritation, the guardian replied, "Who was stopping you from joining them?" I started to go on about how not everyone was born rich and we don't choose our fate. The guardian ignored my words and said, "That's the point. Everyone is free to choose any destiny they wish. The only freedom we truly have is the freedom of choice. You can choose anything you want." His statement did not at all fit with my philosophy of life, and I made to argue with him. But the guardian would not listen. "Fool," he said, "you have the right to choose, but you don't exercise it. You do not even understand what to choose really means." This is ridiculous, I thought. What does he mean by "I can choose whatever I want"? Anyone would think that you could just conjure up anything you wanted. At that moment, I suddenly realized that I was dreaming. The situation threw me and I did not know how to behave. As far as I can recollect, I hinted to the old man that he could choose to speak rubbish whenever, whether in a dream or in waking, but there ended the extent of his freedom. My comment did not seem to bother the guardian at all. In fact, he laughed in response, aware of how ridiculous the situation was. What was the point of getting into a debate with a figure from my own dream? I was considering whether it would be better to wake myself up. As if reading my mind, the old man said, "That's enough. We don't have much time." I hadn't expected them to send a moron like you, but I must carry on with my mission nonetheless. I was going to ask him what his mission was and who they were, but he ignored me, instead giving me a riddle, which at the time seemed quite absurd. Everyone can have the freedom to choose whatever they want, but here's a riddle for you. How do you acquire that freedom? When you guess the answer correctly, your apples will fall to the sky. So we have choice, but in some areas of our lives, we all have different areas in which this plays out, we feel that we can't, like we don't know how to make choices in that area, that we feel like a victim to the circumstance. And this is basically what happens to most people when they get diagnosed with a disease. They not only feel victimized to it, but they even identify with it and make it part of themselves. And that's just one choice. There's many choices that a person could assume as a result of a diagnosis. And even getting a diagnosis is part of choices that are made, right? Leading up to that, or going and getting the diagnosis, right? Because there's a lot of different things that for having a diagnosis does not help whatsoever, other than to reinforce the problem. So when you're not aware of the different choices that exist, it's kind of difficult to make any choices. So the first step in learning to make choices is to open up to the possibility that choices even exist. And when you open up to that possibility that there are more choices than to just go to the doctor, get a diagnosis, and then do what you're told. If you open up to that, the doctor is not the authority over your life, and to recognize that words have power, and to accept those words as truth is one choice that results in different outcomes in our lives. So the first step would be to literally just open up your mind that there may be other ways that you don't know about that exist in this reality that you can use to heal yourself. That there's more than one way of interacting with symptoms that your body is expressing. And in the Western way, there's one way of looking at it, and it's to cluster those symptoms together and put a name on them, calling them a disease and giving it more power than ever. And then going down the road of, the three things that are offered when you go to the doctor is either a diagnosis, surgery, or drugs, right? So if you're not in an emergency situation and you start to look at those symptoms, you can actually, basically what I'm saying is if you're not in an emergency situation, then you have time to make a different choice than to simply just go to the doctor. So basically looking to alternatives, start to open your mind that something else exists and start looking at these different things that you could possibly do to get to the bottom of what that symptom really means, right? Because if you just cut it out or suppress it, then you're not actually getting to the root, which means it's just going to express in a new way.